Hello everybody, Fast Hippie here. We're watching another game from the Argent Arena, this time between GoXDS and Moon Knight. This should be a very exciting match. Moon Knight is one of the top Battlecon players and one of the top Riflam players. And GoXDS is one of the most common players. I end up playing GoXDS all the time, probably just because he's at the same time slot I am. And so what's interesting about this match is a couple things. Riflam's styles have changed. Basically, his install actually gains his reagents at end of beat instead of on hit. And since Moon Knight is one of the top players, it should be really interesting to watch how he plays against Eligor, because Riflam is a character that really wants to play against his opponent. Starting out here, GoXDS plays Vengeful Drive, which makes a lot of sense since it is a full board drive. And Moon Knight counters with Alchemaic Drive. As it turns out, these two moves clash and they move to Burst. Although they played the same moves here, the way the speeds work, since Alchemaic doesn't add additional priority to this Burst, they no longer clash and they both back off. And so GoXDS retreats 1, Moon Knight retreats 2. Vengeful forces GoXDS to advance 1 here, but because his range is 2 to 3, he actually misses. Moon Knight, on the other hand, has range 2 to 4 and is able to hit him, essentially getting a free beat. Now, to note here, the reason that Moon Knight is able to hit at this range is that nearly all of Riflam's styles has additional 0-1 range, either on the style itself or an advanced one. This is one of the advantages of Riflam, that almost all of his attacks are super great at that mid-range game and gives Riflam quite an advantage while fighting at the mid-range. So as we go into beat 2, GoXDS plays Counter Shot. This is a really smart move because he expects his opponent to either play Shot or Drive, but mostly likely Shot since they're at range 4 from each other. Moon Knight could play Drive with one of his moves that give him additional range and be able to get in range, but GoXDS will ante a couple vengeance tokens here just in case that his opponent does play Drive. As it turns out, Moon Knight actually plays a very interesting pair here and plays Transformative Install. This is interesting because although Install misses, because Install now has the end of beat gain reagent, Moon Knight is able to gain a reagent even though he doesn't hit his opponent. So GoXDS is actually able to get a 5 to 0 beat here and catch up from the beat where Moon Knight was able to hit him for 3 to 0. And so at the end of beat here, Moon Knight will get his power reagent back, and we'll see that this is a strong theme that throughout, that Moon Knight focuses on putting power onto his attack as much as he can, because he feels that power is the way to beat GoXDS. So GoXDS plays Martial Drive here. This is really interesting because the expectation here, I think, by GoXDS is that he's going to be hit by his opponent and then be able to drive back with the additional attack. Martial. The reason he thinks this is that really the only move that his opponent has at range here is Drive. Moon Knight could play Shot at this range, but in that case, GoXDS would be able to close the range with his Martial Drive. And so Moon Knight plays Residual Drive here and does a very interesting thing. He actually chooses only to advance 1. Now, he could have advanced 2 and hit his opponent for 6, but he didn't want to take the additional +4 damage that Martial would have given him, and also gave GoXDS 5 vengeance tokens. So by only advancing 1, he doesn't give him vengeance tokens, and he takes 4 less damage. The problem I see here is that if he did choose to hit him, it would have been an 8 to 6 beat. As it turns out, it ends up being a 4 to 0 beat. So 8 to 6 would have been a little bit tighter than 4 to 0, but it makes sense given that he doesn't want to give his opponent a bunch of vengeance tokens to work with. So now that we move into beat 5, we'll see what happens here. Oh, sorry, we're actually in beat 4. What am I talking about? So GoXDS plays Vengeful Burst, and we'll see what his opponent does. His opponent plays Experimental Burst. And so in this case, unlike before where GoXDS lost the exchange where they both played Burst, in this case, because Vengeful Burst is faster than Experimental Burst, GoXDS is able to retreat in such a way that he can then advance back with the Vengeful and hit his opponent. And because Experimental only gives effective stun guard 3, this Vengeful Burst is actually enough to stun Moon Knight. And Vengeful gives GoXDS 2 Vengeance tokens to work with, so we can combine it with some of his other attacks. So we're just in the cleanup here. Everybody's getting their force gauge. And we move on to beat 5. So to note, Moon Knight put additional range on his burst, which is really good. That's one of the things you can do with Experimental. GoXDS plays Switch Dodge here, which I guess makes sense. He's probably afraid of some dangerous attack and he wants to reposition. But as it turns out, his opponent also plays Switch Dodge. So they both play Switch Slot because it's the sensible move here to actually hit their opponents. And that clashes. So then they both play Switch Grasp, I guess. And that clashes. So then they both play Switch Strike, I guess. And then that clashes. And then they only have one card left, so they play their unique abilities. As it turns out, Moon Knight definitely comes ahead on this exchange. Although they both miss, Moon Knight is actually able to gain a reagent counter back for free at end of beat. So this actually was quite in the favor of Moon Knight. Go for a quad clash. Good luck on that. That's not something you can really plan for, but I'm sure Moon Knight did because he's just a boss. So, as noted, he gets power back. He always gets power back. Power is his way. He thinks he's going to be his opponent this turn, so it's power or bust. So, GoXDS plays Chain Dodge here. Super uber death power drive that his opponent could play, which his opponent could definitely play at this point. He antis stun guard here to try to get additional force out of his opponent, but as it is, Moon Knight is actually at 7 life and is gaining 2 force a turn, where GoXDS is only gaining 1 force a turn. So trying to trick your opponent into anteing additional tokens is not, super useful, but you can. GoXDS will actually be using Chained here to pull him in at range and deal 4 damage. Luckily for Moon Knight, a residual gives him that additional 2 stun guard, and he's actually able to take this blow and attack back. Unluckily for Moon Knight, he's really far behind in the life race here, and so he's really in a difficult position to catch up soon. As such, Moon Knight will actually advance here, which is very interesting because typically Riflam likes to stay at range 2 because all of his attacks allow him to attack at that range while also limiting your opponent's options, but instead he chooses to advance and stay at range 1. This indicates that he's going to play his one and only range 1 move, which is substantial. And so GoXDS gets a feeling that his opponent's going to be aggressive here and actually plays counter dodge. And Moon Knight antes power on his force gauge. He antes power on his reagent, and so he's clearly going for a huge payoff this turn. and then dodge ends up being just the absolute perfect call here. His drive is an absolute beast at this point, being, I think, power 6 and speed 5, I think. But dodge ends up allowing GoXDS to survive this beat without taking any damage. If he didn't dodge here, it would have likely been an 8-0 beat by Moon Knight, and he would have been able to close this life gap that he's at and make this game very, very close. So we are now moving on to B8, and GoXDS plays a move that is actually kind of surprising to me because he hasn't played Retribution this whole game. Retribution Aegis this whole game. Retribution Aegis, I think, is one of Eligor's best attacks, and GoXDS could have played it throughout the game, but he ended up not really finding a time and a place to play it, so he plays it here. But Retribution Aegis is Eligor's best styles, allowing him to trade very favorably and deal a ton of damage back to his opponent. As it turns out, Moon Knight actually plays Alchemaic Dodge here, and so Retribution Aegis doesn't really do anything, but, you know, I still love Retribution Aegis. Typically with me, I like to split Retribution and Aegis across multiple attacks to really get the most out of both effects, but doing them together really gives you an extremely powerful attacks. Eligor is actually going to miss here, and we are going to be moving on to beat 9. Now what's interesting is that Moon Knight could have retreated, but he decides to stay at 1 away from his opponent at range 2. This makes sense because a lot of Riflam's attacks are really good at range 2. And so we'll see what happens. GoXDS plays Chain Strike here, which I think only loses to... As it turns out, they start anteing force and they start anteing power back and forth to each other. And Moon Knight antes range. I think this is a giveaway to GoXDS that he's not playing Burst, but he still could be playing Burst. But as it is, GoXDS starts anteing like crazy and antes additional power and additional stun guard. Moon Knight plays Transformative Install this beat, which is a very powerful attack. With the install effect, it's actually going to be up to 6 power and 4 range. But because GoXDS played Strike, he has enough stun guard here that he can take the attack and strike back. And because his opponent missed the big payoff attack when he played Substantial Drive, he doesn't actually have GoXDS's life low enough that he can kill him with this attack. And so GoXDS will gain some additional vengeance here. He'll use Chained to pull him in, and he's actually able to finish off his opponent. So this was excellently played by both players, and I'm excited to record and watch the next match. See you guys another time, and I hope you enjoyed watching this game as much as I did. Have a good evening, everybody. Take it easy.